Title: Whispers of Eternity. Chapter 1. The First Glance. The year was 1902, and the cobblestone streets of Belhaven were bustling with the quiet symphony of everyday life. Eleanor Whitmore, a young artist with a heart full of dreams, stood before a vast canvas in her small attic studio, her fingers stained with shades of blue and gold. Her world was a whirlwind of colors, emotions, and longing, a longing she couldn't quite define. James Thornton, an aspiring writer with ink-stained hands and a mind overflowing with stories, had just arrived in Belhaven. He had traveled from London in search of inspiration, seeking the quiet charm of a town untouched by the haste of the modern world. Fate, ever the silent architect of love, wove their paths together on a crisp autumn afternoon. Eleanor had stepped out of her studio for a walk along the river bank, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She often found solace in the rhythmic lull of the water, the golden hues of fallen leaves reflecting in its gentle currents. As she turned a corner near the town's old bookstore, she collided, quite literally, into James. The impact sent her sketchbook tumbling to the ground, pages fluttering open like the wings of a bird caught in flight. James, ever the gentleman, bent down to retrieve it, his eyes catching a glimpse of the delicate portraits she had drawn. He hesitated for a fraction of a moment, mesmerized by the depth of emotion in her work. "I'm terribly sorry," Eleanor murmured, brushing her auburn curls away from her face. "No, it's entirely my fault," James replied, offering her the sketchbook with a small, warm smile. "These are remarkable." Eleanor looked at him then, really looked at him. His eyes were a deep shade of green, thoughtful and kind, filled with the unspoken promise of untold stories. Something within her stirred, a quiet whisper in her soul, as if she had known him before in another life, another time. "Thank you," she said softly, tucking the book close to her chest. James hesitated before speaking again. "May I buy you a cup of tea? As an apology, of course." She should have refused. She barely knew him. And yet, something about him made her heart lean toward yes. "Yes," she whispered, sealing the first step of a love story neither of them could have foreseen. Chapter 2. Letters in the Rain. The days that followed were filled with quiet conversations in the corner of the tea shop, long walks by the river, and the exchange of letters when their schedules kept them apart. James would leave notes at her door, small fragments of poetry, words that spoke to Eleanor's heart in a way no one else ever had. Eleanor, in return, sketched little moments of their time together. His laughter caught in the golden light of afternoon, the way his hand absent-mindedly brushed his hair when deep in thought. But love is never without its trials, and soon the whisper of war loomed over the horizon, threatening to tear apart the fragile bond they had built. Chapter 3. A Love Tested. News of war reached Belhaven in the early days of summer. James received a letter. His services as a journalist were requested at the front lines. He had dreamed of writing about the world, but never in such tragic circumstances. The thought of leaving Eleanor, of missing the quiet moments they had come to cherish, filled him with sorrow. "I don't want to go," he confessed one evening as they stood by the riverbank. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, reflecting the turmoil in their hearts. Eleanor took his hand in hers, pressing it gently. "You must," she said, her voice steady despite the ache she felt. "The world needs to hear the truth, and you have a gift, James." "I'm afraid," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "So am I," she replied, her gaze locked onto his. "But love is not about holding on too tightly. It's about trusting that no matter the distance, no matter the storms, we will find our way back to each other." James leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. "Promise me you'll wait." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat. "Always." And so, with a final embrace, James left, taking with him a heart full of memories and a single sketch Eleanor had given him, one of the two of them beneath the golden autumn trees, a moment frozen in time. Chapter 4. The letters that kept them alive. The war raged on, and months turned into years. Letters became their lifeline, carrying whispers of love across vast distances. James wrote of the horrors he witnessed, but also of hope, of the kindness he found in unexpected places, of the dream of coming home. Eleanor, in turn, wrote of Belhaven, of the changing seasons, of how she still walked by the river and imagined him beside her. She painted more than ever, pouring her longing into every brushstroke, capturing the love that refused to fade despite time and war. But fate is never kind for too long. One day the letters stopped. Eleanor waited day after day, but no reply came. The silence was deafening. Had something happened to James? Was he lost to the war, another name on a growing list of casualties? Her heart refused to believe it. And so she clung to hope, praying that love was strong enough to bring him back. Chapter 5. A Promise Kept. Seasons passed, and Belhaven's once vibrant autumn hues turned to the frost of winter. Eleanor found herself visiting the riverbank more often, whispering silent prayers to the wind. The town had given up hope, but she never did. And then, one evening, as she stood beneath the now barren trees, she heard footsteps crunching against the snow. Her breath caught as she turned, and there he was, James. His uniform was tattered, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes, those deep green eyes, still held the love he had carried across the battlefield. Tears blurred Eleanor's vision as she ran to him, collapsing into his arms. He held her tight, as if afraid she might vanish. "I told you I'd wait," she whispered. "And I told you I'd come back," he murmured against her hair. They stood there in the quiet embrace of the falling snow, their love no longer just whispers of eternity, but a promise fulfilled. Chapter 6. A New Beginning. With James home, the world felt whole again, yet war had left its scars. He spoke little of what he had seen, but Eleanor saw it in his eyes, the ghosts that lingered, the weight of loss he carried. She held his hand through silent nights, painted the warmth of their love onto every canvas, hoping to remind him that light still existed. As spring returned, so did hope. James resumed writing, pouring his experiences into words that touched the hearts of many. Eleanor's paintings found recognition beyond Belhaven, their love story immortalized in every brushstroke. One evening, by the riverbank where it all began, James knelt before her. "Eleanor Whitmore, will you make me the happiest man alive?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." And so, beneath the golden hues of autumn once more, their love story continued. Whispers of eternity, now a lifetime shared. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Love. Years passed, and their love story became a tale told across generations. Their grandchildren played beneath the same golden trees, reading old letters and finding inspiration in the art and words their grandparents had left behind. Even as time moved forward, the whispers of their love remained, an eternal echo in the wind, a love story never forgotten.